She didn't give birth to you, and never once dared to call you son. But in the very end, she left you. Everything. A will that left the entire room in stunned silence. A child denied for a lifetime, yet the only one who stayed until the very end. Do you believe that a home doesn't need blood to become a family? Today's story will make you reconsider what truly defines a mother. Before we begin, please like this video and comment below to let us know where you're watching from. Your support is what drives us to keep bringing you these powerful, soul-stirring stories. Let's begin. The conference room at Caldwell and Associates law offices was unnervingly quiet. Only the soft ticking of a mahogany wall clock filled the silence as pale white light spilled onto the table from a domed ceiling lamp. Vanessa Sterling shot to her feet, her leather chair screeching sharply as it slid back. "You're not her son." Her voice cut through the room, each word sharp as a blade. "You were just some stray she took in. And now you're taking everything you don't deserve." The air thickened instantly. Mr. Caldwell furrowed his brow slightly, but said nothing. He'd witnessed many inheritance disputes before, but rarely one this personal. Sitting at the head of the table opposite her, Noah Bennett didn't move. His navy blue shirt was crisply pressed, his wrists relaxed, his hands gently holding the letter from Grace Whitmore, the woman both of them had just lost, though in very different ways. Noah looked up at Vanessa. No protest, no anger, just a quiet gaze, like someone who'd heard those words in his mind countless times. But this was the first time they were spoken aloud. "I didn't take anything," he said, voice low and steady. "I was just the only one who never left." Vanessa let out a bitter laugh, the kind that only comes from someone used to being at the center of everything, and suddenly finds herself forgotten in her own family's story. Her cheeks flushed red with rage, but instead of saying more, she clutched her handbag and stormed out of the room like a silent storm. Mr. Caldwell exhaled sharply, about to speak, but Noah was already standing. He didn't look at anyone, just nodded politely, then turned and walked out of the room, a room that had just reminded him no bloodline could ever defend what was lived with the heart. The glass door closed behind him, but to understand why he was even in that room, we have to go back 11 years to where it all began, with nothing more than a cup of tea and a front door that was always open on Sundays. There was nothing particularly special about the quiet street in the Green Hollow suburbs. But at house number 17, every Sunday morning at exactly 9 a.m., the doorbell rang twice, not too fast, not too slow, like a private ritual between two people not bound by blood, but never truly apart. Noah Bennett, now in his 30s, tall, broad-shouldered, but with the gentle gaze of someone who had long learned how to move quietly through a world that never fully welcomed him, stood at the doorstep. In his left hand, a brown paper bag with warm cinnamon apple scones from the old corner bakery, what she always called a sweet little luxury in a simple life. In his right, the folded Sunday newspaper neatly tucked under his arm. The door opened before he could knock a third time. "You're 3 minutes late again, Noah." Grace Whitmore's voice rang out from the living room. Not angry, just familiar. He stepped in without asking, like family. The house was old but tidy. The scent of mint tea, aged paper, and a hint of lavender tucked inside a heating pad blended into something Noah once described as not a house, but a memory made real. In the corner of the room sat Grace, silver hair in a loose bun, reading glasses perched on her nose, resting in an old floral armchair, softened just enough by time to cradle the back of someone who had been a librarian for 3 decades. An open crossword puzzle sat on her lap. 2 teacups were already on the table. "You forgot the chamomile." "Didn't forget," Noah replied, pulling a small packet from his pocket. "I was saving it for a dramatic reveal." Grace raised an eyebrow, half amused, half mock-stern. Noah leaned down to kiss her forehead, a ritual without a name. He poured the tea and sat across from her. Their morning unfolded as always, debating crossword clues, bickering about the names of obscure authors, and falling into comfortable silences. But the silence between them was never a void. It was an understanding that needed no words. Sometimes, if the sun was out, They'd sit in the backyard. Noah would prune the roses, while Grace recited the Latin names of each plant. She couldn't garden anymore. Her hands trembled too much. But she remembered every flower she'd ever planted. And so every Sunday, one would come, the other would wait. Not out of duty, not for recognition, but because some doors, if left unopened, the world would grow just a little colder. And no one would notice it, except the one who once stepped through. The air was slightly crisp that day, the scent of old rain still lingering on the windowsill. Noah was trimming the white roses. Grace always reminded him, "Tilt the shears to the left, or you'll bruise the stems." From inside the house, her voice floated out, not loud, not clear, more like she was speaking to herself. If only I had been strong enough. A pause. I should have done it sooner. Noah stopped. He turned back, looking through the kitchen window, and saw her sitting in her chair, teacup in hand, eyes fixed on the pale grey sky in the distance. He didn't ask what it was. Because they had an unspoken agreement, don't reopen what makes the other shrink. Don't dig up old stories, don't force answers. Noah simply stepped inside and handed her a rose still wet with dew. Grace accepted it without looking at him, offering only a faint smile. "Thank you. He froze, not because of the words, but because of how she pulled them back halfway. "Thank you, my son." Clipped like a glitch in an old voice recorder. Noah showed no reaction. He didn't smile. He didn't correct her. He simply poured tea for them both, then sat across from her. From the garden, the wind chimes clinked gently together. A soft, delicate sound, but there was something in it that trembled like a truth never fully spoken. That Sunday, no one opened the door before Noah could knock a third time. There was no classical music playing on the radio, no scent of mint tea drifting from the kitchen, no teasing voice from the living room saying, "You're 3 minutes late again." There was only silence. Noah furrowed his brow slightly. He reached into his coat pocket for the key Grace Whitmore had given him years ago, with a gentle reminder, "Keep this in case I forget to turn off the kettle." The door opened. Inside, everything was familiar, the scent of old books, dried lavender and woven fabrics long worn in. But the space itself felt lifeless. The armchair was still there, but empty. The teacup on the table held no hot water. The crossword puzzle lay untouched, still on the same page. The kitchen, clean to the point of feeling strange. "Grace?" Noah called out, softly at first, then louder. No answer, only the ticking of the wall clock and the faint sound of wind brushing against the rose bushes outside. He walked upstairs. His hand brushed along the wooden banister, the one he'd repainted last spring. Each step was deliberate, gentle, as if afraid to disturb something sacred. The bedroom door was ajar, and there she was, lying still in a peace too perfect to disturb. A book rested loosely in her hands, left unfinished. Soft window light spilled over her white hair, her face, her lips slightly parted as if mid-sentence, a sentence that would never be finished. Noah sat beside the bed. His hand reached for hers. The same hand that had once trembled while pouring tea, that had rested on his shoulder the night he cried alone in the corner after his first nightmare. There were no tears, not at first, only silence that drained every sound from the world. He reached down for the blanket draped over her. The one he used to joke was uniformly ugly because she'd knit it from mismatched leftover yarn. "It's not ugly," she once said. "It's stitched from things no one else thought to keep, just like you." Noah pressed his lips together. His eyes glistened, but he didn't sob. Because she hadn't left in pain. She had left this world the same way she had lived in it, quietly, with order and never a burden to anyone. 2 days later, she arrived. Vanessa Sterling, Grace's only biological granddaughter, stepped out of a neatly parked black rental car in front of the house. She carried a leather rolling suitcase made in Italy, a Burberry handbag, and a gaze that barely concealed its judgment. No tears, no embraces, not a single glance lingered more than 2 seconds on any photo hanging in the home. "I'll handle the funeral arrangements," she said curtly. "We should go with a reputable funeral home." She deserves to be properly remembered. Noah stood at the end of the hallway, giving a slight nod. He said nothing, because from the moment she stepped through the door, he knew. This woman hadn't come for grace. She came for the role, for the ritual, for something not held in the heart, but something that still needed her signature at the bottom of a document. On the dining table, Noah had already laid out a stack of Grace's old photo albums, from her early days at the community library to her final years in the back garden. Vanessa flipped through a few pages, then closed the album like she was browsing a dated real estate catalogue. She really lived simply, she said offhandedly, unclear whether it was pity or critique. At the first meeting with the funeral director, Vanessa spoke briskly, clearly, using precise language as if delivering a presentation. No lilies. Grace hated them. She liked white roses, but keep it modest. The ceremony should be formal, but not overly sentimental. Social niceties, but restrained. Noah listened, and quietly selected the piece of music Grace loved most, a sorrowful Chopin symphony she often played on rainy afternoons. Vanessa didn't object, not out of agreement, but simply because she didn't care. While Noah had just lost a piece of his heart, for Vanessa it was merely a final chapter she needed to flip past. On her way to the inheritance. That morning, St. Martin's Church was bathed in gentle sunlight. Not overly crowded, but the pews gradually filled. There were old neighbors, colleagues from the library, a few children, now grown, who Grace had once tutored for free every Tuesday afternoon. And there was one man, sitting quietly in the front row, hand clutching a wrinkled handkerchief Grace had once embroidered, misspelling his name years ago as Noan. Vanessa Sterling was the first to take the podium. She said what needed to be said. Grace was a woman of principle, meticulous, punctual, and exceptionally organized. She never missed a birthday card, and she never skipped an Easter service at church. Brief, polite, proper. She offered a faint smile, nodded, stepped down. No one cried. Then Noah Bennett stepped forward. No paper, no preparation, no official title. He stood before the casket, draped in white cloth, eyes fixed on the photo of Grace sitting in her garden, holding a well-worn book with a broken spine. He spoke, slowly, low, steady. "I wasn't Grace Whitmore's biological son. There's no paperwork saying that, no bloodline linking us. But I know she preferred mint tea over chamomile. I know she pretended not to notice when I snuck in the wrong crossword answers, and she never corrected them. I know the blanket she knitted had 6 mismatched yarn colors because I once asked why it looked so ugly, and she replied, 'Ugly things can still keep you warm.' I know she cried once, quietly, when I almost dropped out of school because I couldn't forgive myself." His voice paused, a long, still beat. "I never called her mother, but she was the first place I ever called home." No one spoke, only a child in the back row, resting her head on her mother's shoulder, whispered, "Mom, was that her son?" And the mother nodded gently. Yes, her son, in the best way. Behind them, the soft hum of a Chopin symphony drifted from the organ. No wailing, no dramatics, just a quiet goodbye. Gentle enough that no one had to carry guilt away with them. 3 days after the funeral, Noah Bennett sat in an old velvet chair at Caldwell Law Office. His hands were laced together, opening and closing over and over, not out of nerves, but because he didn't really know why he was there. He'd never imagined being called to the reading of the will. He wasn't an heir, he was just the one who had stayed the longest. The door opened. Vanessa Sterling walked in, black coat, sunglasses perched on her head, her steps as cold and polished as porcelain. She gave a curt nod, never once looking at Noah, then sat across from him, legs crossed, one hand resting on her designer handbag like she was back in a corporate boardroom. Mr. Caldwell, aged but meticulous, placed a cream-colored folder on the table and gently opened it. Per the wishes of Ms. Grace Whitmore, this will is to be read in full, with both parties present. And I hereby confirm that this document is fully legal, handwritten and signed, with the most recent update dated 8 months ago. Vanessa leaned back, silent. He began to read, his voice steady, each word landing like a tap on the hardwood table. To my granddaughter, Vanessa Sterling, I leave the old wooden box in the living room cabinet. Inside are family photographs, a few of my favorite bookmarks, and a handwritten letter explaining why I am doing what I am about to do. Vanessa's eyebrow arched. She said nothing, but her fingers tightened slightly. Then Mr. Caldwell turned the page. A pause. To Noah Bennett. The room seemed to chill, as if a gust of wind had passed through. I leave the entirety of the remainder of my estate. He looked up at Noah, then continued, including the house at 17 Green Hollow Street, all its contents, a savings account of $87,000 at the local bank, and all personal belongings not otherwise specified. Vanessa sat frozen, her lips parted, as if about to speak, but no sound came out. Mr. Caldwell placed a small slip of paper on the table. Grace's handwritten note addressed to Noah. You are not a passerby. You are the roots. Use this home to continue what I no longer have time to finish. The room fell silent. On one side, material inheritance. On the other, a bond with no paperwork, no shared blood, but alive as if bound by marrow. And in just a few seconds of silence, the world split in two. Vanessa Sterling left the law office like a thundercloud, silent but suffocatingly heavy. Her high heels struck sharply against the stone steps. The glass door behind her clicked shut with a clack, as sharp as a blade. Noah Bennett followed. He didn't chase. He simply walked, the same way he'd walked for the past 11 years, slow, steady, and without making noise. But today, silence was no longer an option. Vanessa spun around. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp, like shattered glass. So you got everything. Congratulations. Someone with no blood ties to her walks into the house at 14, and now walks away with the entire home, the money, the Whitmore name. And me? A wooden box and a few old photos. Noah stood tall. He didn't look away. I never asked for anything. Vanessa let out a cold, bitter laugh. Exactly, you didn't ask. You just stayed every Sunday, made tea, planted flowers, played the little pretend son game while she got weaker and weaker. You made her believe you were all she had left. Noah lowered his gaze for a second, then raised it again. His voice was low, rough, but each word landed with weight. I didn't make her believe anything, I just showed up. Because she was the only person who never asked how long I planned to stay. And you? You're her blood. But 7 years ago, the only time you came back was for her signature to sell off ancestral land. Vanessa froze, but then shot back, eyes narrowed. I did that out of duty, to preserve family value. You're just a lucky outsider. Noah nodded slightly. Maybe, but you came for the funeral. I came every Sunday, for 11 years. A breeze stirred through the quiet street. The rustling of leaves was faint. But his words hit like a hammer against the pride of someone who had never been placed on the sidelines in their own family tree. Vanessa inhaled, her eyes wet but unwilling to cry. She turned away, pulled her suitcase hard behind her, and left. Not because she had nothing left to say, but because she couldn't bear that the one who left everything behind left it all to someone who didn't even share the name. That afternoon, Noah Bennett returned to house number 17 not with the posture of an heir, but as someone hollowed out by questions no one had yet answered. The house was still as quiet as every Sunday before, but there was no one waiting for him by the teapot anymore. He walked into Grace's small study. This was the room where she used to grade papers, scribble notes into library books, and keep notebooks no one else was ever allowed to read. Noah had never stayed in here for more than 10 minutes. Today, he sat down at her desk. His hand brushed across the worn wood. He touched an old fountain pen, then opened the bottom drawer, and he saw it. A large cream-colored envelope, addressed in graceful, slanted handwriting. For Noah, when I'm gone. He inhaled, deep, long, slow. then opened it. Inside was a stack of letters, 17 in total, ordered year by year. From 2006, the year he first arrived, to 2023, just months before she passed. He opened the first. "You may not trust me yet. That's okay. I don't expect you to, but I made the lasagna you like. And even if you don't eat it, I'll make it again. Next week, and the week after." He let out a small, choked laugh. The second letter, "Today you called me Miss Grace. It made me feel light. Just one word, but such a big step. I know you still sleep with your shoes under your pillow. I get it. Take your time." Each letter was a fragment of a story Grace had never told aloud. Feelings she had tucked away, so Noah wouldn't feel indebted to her. There was a letter congratulating him for passing high school. A letter confessing that she cried when she learned he nearly dropped out. One letter said simply, "I bought more mint tea, not because I like it, but because you drink it more than I do." Noah didn't know how long he had been reading. He only realized it was nightfall. When he reached the 17th and final letter, and the very first line, tightened something deep in his chest. "You once asked me with your eyes, because your mouth wouldn't, why I never officially adopted you as my son. This is my answer, and it's not a simple one. 3. And just like that, another door was about to open. Not inside the house, but into a past Grace had tried to shield them both from, to protect something fragile. The desk lamp cast a soft glow over the slanted handwriting, the blue ink slightly blurred at the corners. Perhaps by time, or perhaps by tears. Noah Bennett sat alone in the small room, his hands trembling slightly as he opened the final letter. The one Grace Whitmore had written when she knew her time was running out. "You once asked with your eyes, and I read it, because I used to be a librarian, and the best readers are those who know how to stay silent. Why didn't I make you my legal son?" Noah swallowed hard, his fingers clenched around the page, as if afraid it might vanish if he let go. "I tried. I truly did. I filed the paperwork. I met with a lawyer. I filled out everything. But then a formal objection came in, a legal opposition. Someone from my family, someone who feared that if I adopted you, the inheritance they deserved would be split in half." The next line was written with darker strokes, as if she had pressed harder in a moment of pain. That person was Vanessa Sterling. The air seemed to vanish from the room. The little house, once a resting place, cracked. Not in its walls, but in Noah's chest. Grace continued, "I fought. I tried to overturn it. But because you still had living biological relatives, even if estranged, the law allowed bloodkin to contest it. Vanessa did just that. She cited financial concerns, claimed I was emotionally compromised, legally unsound." Noah closed his eyes, his breath caught in his throat. All the quiet acceptance he had held, the belief that maybe she didn't need to call me her son, shattered into something sharp and undeniable. Grace's final lines, "I didn't tell you because I was afraid you'd leave. But if a signature is all that defines a mother, then this world is a poor place indeed. You are my son, no papers, no bloodlines. Just promise me, you'll still knock on the door each Sunday." Noah rested his head on the desk. He didn't cry, just sat in silence, as if the whole world had tilted off its axis and he couldn't let himself fall with it. Bullseye. For the first time he understood. Grace didn't refuse to claim him. Someone had stolen her right to be his mother, and his right to belong. The next morning, Noah Bennett quietly opened the old filing cabinet in Grace's study. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for. He only knew that after last night's letter, he needed something real. He needed to face something that existed, on paper. The third drawer from the bottom. A thick brown file folder. The label read, "Adoption, Noah B., 2009 to 2010. His hand froze for a few seconds. Then he opened it. Inside were photocopies of legal documents, medical clearance forms, financial verification, an assessment report from the Department of Family Services, and a receipt for a scheduled court interview. Everything was ready. And then, on the very last page, was the thing that ended it all. Notice of objection to legal adoption. Filed by Vanessa Sterling. Date submitted July 3, 2010. Under reason for objection, concerns about the financial stability of the guardian, concerns regarding emotional manipulation by a minor with a history of psychological trauma, and the potential impact on the Sterling family's inheritance rights. Noah read it over and over. The potential impact on the Sterling family's inheritance. A single line, an idea, but it had been strong enough to derail an entire life. He didn't know how long he stood there, only that his hands, still holding the page, had begun to tremble. And for the first time in years, Noah felt angry, not at Grace, not at himself, but at the system. That allowed someone to stop a child from calling someone mother just because of money. He placed the documents back in the folder, closed it carefully, not to seek revenge, not to put it on display, but to preserve it as proof that their love had once been denied but never erased. Bullseye. Paper can stop the word son from being printed in a family line, but it can't stop someone from placing flowers on a grave every Sunday for life. 2 days after reading the final letter, Noah Bennett knocked on the door of Vanessa Sterling's penthouse apartment. Not with a fist, but with a calmness so cold it felt like stone. Vanessa opened the door, same expressionless face, hair neatly pinned back, lips painted in a neutral tone. "I don't know what you still want," she said immediately. "The assets have been transferred, the will has been read, the story is over." Noah said nothing, then handed her a copy of the legal objection to the adoption, clipped together with Grace's final letter. "You once said I wasn't family," he said slowly, "but it was you who stopped that from ever becoming true." Vanessa didn't deny it. She simply took the papers, flipped through them softly, then set them on the table, like she'd just touched something that had long since died. Noah asked, "Why?" "I was 14. I never asked for anything, but you were so afraid that you went as far as filing paperwork just to stop me from being her son." A long pause. Vanessa looked down at the floor, then answered, without defense, without trembling, because she was the last person in my life who still called me family. And I couldn't bear to see her give her whole heart to someone who didn't carry the Sterling name. Her voice cracked but never softened. "I didn't hate you, Noah. I just didn't want to become a stranger in my own bloodline." Noah looked at her for a long time, not with anger, not with mockery, just an expression that quietly said, "You had the right to feel left behind, but I had the right to be loved." Then he spoke, softer than the wind. "You took the signature, but you didn't take the memories." He turned and walked out of the apartment, leaving Vanessa alone, with a stack of black and white documents, and a truth that could no longer be denied. She didn't follow, because for the first time in her life, she knew she didn't lose because of the law. She lost because love never needs to be justified. Bullseye. And from this moment on, the audience understands the one who wins isn't the one who gets the most. It's the one who stays dash until the very end, even when no one told them they had to. That afternoon, the sky was overcast. No rain, but grey enough to make house number 17 look like an old photograph no one ever bothered to reprint. Noah Bennett moved the floral armchair back to its place by the window. He tidied the teacups on the shelf, replaced the vase of roses on the table with fresh ones. Evelyn's place was almost ready to open. No longer a private home, but a haven for those no one else had kept. And then, the front door opened. Not the wind, not the power company. Vanessa Sterling stepped inside. No business dress, no sunglasses, just a light grey cardigan, her hair loosely pinned, hands empty. She stood at the threshold for a long while, as if still weighing whether she had the right to step into a place where love once had its own seat, without ever needing an invitation. Noah looked up from the tea table. No surprise, no questions, no reproach, just a still gaze, as if they were now in a different season where anger no longer bloomed. "I don't know why I came," Vanessa said. "Maybe to see if this place ever truly became what she wanted. Noah nodded gently, still working on it. But we're close. Vanessa stepped in, her hand brushed softly over the familiar wooden table. Her eyes paused at a photo on the wall. Grace Whitmore sitting in the rose garden, smiling gently beside Noah. No embrace, no physical contact, but the way they looked at each other needed no titles. Vanessa stood still. Didn't say, "I'm sorry." Didn't say, "Thank you." Didn't try to say anything at all. She simply stood in a space where the past had once been severed and now was gently stitched back together by a silence no longer filled with resistance. Noah poured tea, set down an extra cup. No invitation, no denial. Vanessa sat, softly, as if afraid the chair might spring up a memory. She never reached in time while Grace was still alive. They said nothing, but in that silence, what Grace had wanted most finally arrived: one tea table, two people, and no one walking away. There was no grand opening, no banners, no loudspeakers, only a quiet wooden sign hung in front of house number 17, Evelyn's Place, a home for the unclaimed. Noah Bennett planted every flower by hand. He didn't choose roses like Grace once did, but asters, small, unassuming blooms that endure through the cold, just like the kids who would soon live here, unclaimed by name, but no less worthy of blooming. The living room was repainted in a soft cream tone. Grace's old reading corner was left as it was, with a few new round floor cushions, a warm rug, and an open bookshelf for anyone who needed words to forget the weight of long nights. Noah rehung the old photograph in the center of the room. Not a portrait of Grace in her youth, but a candid photo from a Sunday morning long ago. Her smiling quietly behind a teacup, while Noah, unaware, tended to the flowers. The dining table now had more chairs. The upstairs bedroom was renovated into a transitional living space for teens aging out of the foster system, young adults just barely legal, with nowhere else to go. Tasha Nguyen, a 17-year-old Vietnamese girl, would be the first to live here, followed by Aidan Brooks, 18, who had been sleeping on park benches after losing his mother to addiction. No one asked who was in charge. No one called anyone son or daughter. There was just dinner at 6 p.m., afternoon tea every Sunday, and doors that never locked during daylight hours. Vanessa Sterling did visit, once, unannounced. She sat quietly on the front porch, watching the kids water the garden. She handed Noah an old book of Grace's she'd found in the keepsake box. Inside it, a handwritten bookmark. Sometimes you don't need to call someone child to know you've been a mother. Noah accepted it, said nothing, but for the first time he smiled and didn't hold it back. Bullseye. And so this house, once a place of refuge for a 14-year-old boy, unsure whether he deserved to stay, had now become a home for anyone who had ever been overlooked, not because of title, not because of blood, but because some loves, when steady and quiet, are enough to build a place where no one ever has to walk alone again. The afternoon sunlight slanted gently across the porch of house number 17. The air carried the scent of fresh-baked pastries. Laughter echoed from the living room, where the kids were crowded around a Sunday crossword. The same game Grace once taught Noah now turned into an unspoken tradition. Tasha Nguyen ran out from the kitchen, hair loosely tied back, holding an empty glass pitcher. "Uncle Noah, we're out of lemonade." Noah, pruning plants in the yard, looked up. "Check the second shelf. Grace always kept an extra pitcher." Tasha paused. She didn't ask who Grace was, because she'd heard hundreds of stories. From Noah, from the house itself, even from the way the tea was brewed just right without needing to be taught again. She smiled, then darted back inside. Noah remained seated under the sunlight. A stray cat curled beneath his chair. It had appeared ever since the center opened. No one chased it away. No one named it. Much like himself 11 years ago, just needing a place where no one would tell him to leave. He looked at the wooden sign hanging at the gate. Evelyn's Place. For the first time in years, he said her name. Without a choke in his voice, without hiding it in his heart, without letting it fall through tears. just a name spoken aloud, so that kindness could begin again. "Grace," he whispered, "thank you for never locking the door." The scene closes on Noah standing up and walking back inside. The door shuts softly behind him, but the light remains, pouring through the window, filling the room, reflecting off the photograph of the two of them. A moment that needs no caption, because everything that mattered had already been said in the way they had chosen to stay. Not everyone who is born has a place they can call home, and not everyone who loves us needs to share our blood. If you've ever known someone who stayed, not out of duty, but out of choice, leave a comment below. I'm grateful for the one who didn't walk away. And if this story made you think differently about a name, a home, or someone who may have loved you in quiet ways you never realized, please share this video, because somewhere out there, another Noah might be waiting to hear these words. Just to stay, instead of walking away like so many once did to him.